of this lens, which is a zoom lens, which has 3 rings. If you come around this way, and you can see it from your side. So there's a T-stop ring there for your aperture. And you have it on this side, probably white in color, is it? Right. We also had the same markings on our side in a different color, but it's the same, right? And then we've got the zoom, or the focal length ring, to zoom in, zoom out. And this particular lens goes from 10 to 100 millimeter focal length. 10 is its widest angle, 100 is it fully zoomed in. And then the third ring here is the focus ring. And its minimum focus distance is 5 feet. So it can't focus to my hand here, right? It's got to be 5 feet away, so roughly here, right? And if you're actually measuring distances, you're measuring not from the front element of the lens, you're measuring from where the sensor is in this camera. And that little mark there tells you behind the lens, that's where the sensor is here. And that little attachment here, don't take it off, that's for clipping on the tape measure and measuring the distance. All right, so what you're gonna do is, just to start off, the first thing is just frame up the shot, right? Focus the shot and set the aperture. Now at the moment we're just going to work off ambient fluorescent light. But when you all have a few goes at that, then we're going to turn all that off and turn that one on, which is a tungsten color temperature. And you're going to light the face with that light. So just to get yourself started, practice framing the shot, focusing the shot, expose the shot. So you probably want the viewfinder in an upwards angle. So I'm just going to loosen the little locking screw here and just tilt up the viewfinder. I'm going to take this protective cover off, and as it's a camera accessory, it goes back into the camera case. Okay?
So everything you take off, you just put it back?
If it's a camera piece,
right.
yeah. It will have its own it'll have its own bag or case or whatever. Right, now to turn the camera on, there's an on-off switch there. Right? So we just have a quick reminder of what the display screen will show you. We are attached. So it just takes a few seconds to boot up. It's probably going to give me a message, which I'm going to ignore. It'll go away in a few seconds. It's asking me to perform a function, but I'm not going to do it right now. It's asking me to do an APR, which is an automated pixel repair. So it'll scan the sensor, see if there's any dead pixels. But to do it, I have to black out the sensor. It has to be completely covered. So I don't have a lens cap at the moment. So I will do that function some other date. All right, the top left, FPS, what's it stand for?
Frames per second.
All right, 25 frames per second is normal camera speed. Aligned with a shutter, which has a shutter angle, not a shutter speed, a shutter angle of 180 degrees. So for normal shooting, you're going to leave that alone, right? This, however, you will change. So this is color temperature. What does it say there at the moment?
4,300 K.
4,300 degrees Kelvin. All right. So there is only 3 settings. So if I push the button above the color temperature, you'll see the 3 settings. What does the first one say?
3,200.
All right, that's tungsten light, that is a tungsten light. So when we turn off these fluorescent lights, our color temperature from that light will be tungsten. So we will set the color temperature to 3,200. If we were going outside, daylight, we would set it to 5,500 degrees Kelvin. Right? 4,300 is in between the daylight and the Kelvin. It's also the fluorescent color temperature. So we'll leave it at that for the moment. And the next key thing is the exposure index, which is effectively the same thing as ISO, right? And it's 2000. And the native sensitivity, ISO, or exposure index, of the sensor is 2000, right? So it's performing at its optimum on 2000. There are times I would change it. I think we had a look at that a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? We went outside. Yeah. Anyway, we'll go back over that part of it, but we're just going to leave it on 2000 today.
Oh yeah.
Aligned with that, and it's grayed out, so it's not something that you can independently change, is what's called high latitude. We talked about that, didn't we? When we looked at the waveform, which is in, you'll see it in the viewfinder. So we have 6 stops of high latitude. So with a 14 stop dynamic range or latitude sensor, at 2000 ISO, our high latitude is 6 stops above our shooting stop when the shooting stop is exposing for the face, right? Now you have a darker skin tone than we have. So we'll look at that when we start looking at the waveform.
Okay.
Right? Next is M-LUT. So that's a monitor LUT. So the monitor is here, right? This is the monitor, the viewfinder. So we're shooting a particular codec, which is XAVC, which is Sony's own native codec, and we're shooting S-Log2. So we're shooting log footage. So log footage is a flat-looking image, desaturated, low contrast, not a particularly pleasing image to look at in its log form. So we're putting a LUT onto it in the monitor to bring the color saturation and the contrast, etc., to a more normal looking image. When you take the footage off the memory card, which is in here, well, they don't have one in there, you've got to put that LUT back onto the footage because it's log footage. So when you bring it, if you were to bring it into Avid, you'd have to put the LUT back onto it, and it should theoretically look the same as what you saw in the monitor. However, in reality, the monitors would have to be calibrated to match each other, and they're not, is the simple answer. But it will look close to what you saw in this monitor. Okay, so those settings you can leave alone for this exercise right now. What you will need to do is, number 1, focus the viewfinder for your eye. And you use this ring here, which is the diopter. And what you do is, you're not looking through the into the viewfinder, which has a little OLED screen in it. You're not focusing the image as such with the viewfinder. You're focusing the crosshairs, right? Because focusing the viewfinder doesn't affect whether the image is actually in focus or not. It has nothing to do with it. You're only focusing the viewfinder, right? So you look at the crosshairs in the center of your frame, right? And you get them as sharp as you can. And then you have focused the viewfinder for your eye. Then you want to, perfect the focus of the shot as such, right? So that's with the focus ring. So I want you to frame up the shot. Someone's going to sit there, frame up the shot to a kind of a head and shoulders type frame. Consider the eye height in the frame, and you use the crosshairs, which is telling you where the dead center of the frame is, to judge where you would place the eyes in the frame, how high up or low down, right? So frame the shot, focus the shot, and expose the shot with the T-stop. Right?
Wait, if you don't mind me asking, what does that do again? The first one, T-stop.
Right. It's similar to f-stop. It's
Okay.
the aperture. So by changing the aperture, I'm either making the aperture smaller or larger. If I'm making it larger, I'm allowing more light
Into the, okay.
through the lens, hitting the sensor, exposing the shot. If I make it a smaller aperture, I'm allowing less light through the lens, through the aperture, exposing the shot on the sensor. All right. So it's aperture size, if you want to think about it that way. All right. right. Right, off you go. And I said, if you know you're shooting in that direction,